You know that moment when you look at yourself in the mirror, force a smile, and think everything's fine, but deep inside, your soul feels like it's screaming for help? It's a silence so loud it becomes uncomfortable. You try to keep up appearances, go through the motions, talk to people, but it feels like something inside you has slowly started to fade. It's as if the light of your soul is growing dim, almost unnoticeable, like a candle at the end of its flame. No one sees it, but God sees it. He always sees what no one else even notices. And sometimes, what hurts the most is being surrounded by people and still feeling completely out of place. Have you ever felt that? You laugh at the jokes, you join the conversations, but something inside you knows you don't belong there. It's like your heart is somewhere else, longing for something more real, more pure, more peaceful. And it's in that private space, the one no one else enters, that God begins to work. He moves in silence. But when he moves, nothing stays the same for long. Maybe that's why you didn't understand when friendships faded, doors closed, opportunities disappeared, or invitations stopped coming. At the time, it feels unfair. But later you realize that God was pulling you out of places where your soul was slowly dying, even if your body was still smiling. And maybe that's exactly where you are right now, feeling that inner discomfort without knowing why. And that brings us to a point that few people talk about, but it changes everything. There are people who smile on the outside, but inside, they're quietly falling apart. There's no fight, no outburst, no scandal. It's that quiet kind of suffering, the one that slowly eats away at you, like a constant leak that weakens the roof over time. And the worst part? They get used to it. They get used to the emptiness, the distant gaze, the lump in the throat, as if living that way was normal. But not every silence means peace. Some silences are muffled screams. It's that woman who goes to church alone every Sunday because her husband no longer believes, no longer supports, no longer prays with her. And she feels like she's dying inside, little by little, because she's fighting a spiritual war alone inside her own home. It's the young person who walks into their house and feels more fear than relief, because everything there revolves around criticism, harshness, pressure. It's the employee who's forgotten what it feels like to dream, because their workplace doesn't allow them to grow, only survive. These environments don't come with sirens or alarms. They don't scream, they drain. They drain your strength, your joy, your faith, until you no longer recognize yourself. And yet, you stay because you think this is just how life is, that everyone lives like this. But the truth is, when God dwells within someone, he begins to stir discomfort in places where purpose no longer exists. And that silent discomfort might be the clearest sign that something needs to change. But that change rarely starts on the outside. And then, when you least expect it, everything starts slipping out of your control. A relationship ends unexpectedly, a job is lost, a friend drifts away without explanation. You're left trying to put the pieces together, calling it unfair or even punishment. But from God's perspective, that wasn't a loss, it was protection. He removes you from what looks good, to save you from what he already knew would hurt you later on. There are things we don't have the courage to let go of, so God comes and takes them away. And it's not because he's cruel, but because he loves you too much to watch you slowly die in a place where you were meant to bloom. He hears the screams your mouth is too afraid to let out. He sees the tears you wipe away before anyone can notice. And when heaven moves, it's to align the invisible. God doesn't shake your foundation by accident. He's saving you from something you don't yet have the maturity to understand. That's why sometimes the doors you want the most are the ones God slams shut the hardest. Not because you're not good enough, but because you're worth so much that he refuses to let you sink in places that drain your essence. When everything feels like it's falling apart, it could be the exact moment when God is starting to rebuild your story the right way. But for that to happen, you have to learn to recognize when it's God pushing you out of your comfort zone. You pray, you fast, You try to hold on to your faith, but nothing seems to change. You adjust yourself, try not to bother anyone, accept everything in silence. You shrink yourself, and even then, you feel like something inside you is slowly dying. It's like taking deep breaths in a room with no oxygen. You might pretend everything's okay, but your soul knows it's suffocating. And that heaviness in your chest? It's not drama. It's a warning from heaven saying, you weren't created to live like this. And when God sends that warning, He won't let you ignore it for long. But in the middle of that process, doubt shows up. You start to wonder, is the problem me? Am I asking for too much? Am I being ungrateful for not being able to settle for this place? And that line of thinking slowly eats away at your identity. Because you look around and see people settling, so you start to think maybe you should stay quiet too. But what God placed inside of you is not ordinary. And a soul that carries a calling will never feel at peace with just anything. That's why the discomfort cuts so deep. The truth is, the place you're in may have only been temporary, not permanent. Sometimes, the reason you're feeling so out of place isn't because you're weak, but because you've outgrown it. Some pots crack when the roots begin to expand. You're not in crisis, you're in expansion. And God, like a loving and watchful Father, won't let you wither in a place where your faith was meant to flourish. That's when He starts pulling you, even when you don't feel ready to leave yet. God doesn't always speak through thunder. Sometimes, He starts with a restlessness you can't even explain. It's that subtle sense that something just doesn't fit anymore. That space which once brought you comfort now feels heavy. You try to push through, convince yourself it's just a phase, but deep down, your soul already knows God is calling you somewhere else. And the first sign is that silent, persistent discomfort. God removes your peace before He removes you. Other signs begin to show up right after. The joy that once accompanied you slowly starts to fade. Even though everything around you seems to be in order, deep inside, you feel completely empty. Everything stays the same, but nothing feeds you spiritually anymore. You sing, but you don't feel. You listen, but nothing sinks in. You push yourself to keep going, but there's a quiet voice saying, this cycle is over. And the more you ignore it, the heavier the atmosphere becomes, until it starts holding you back. So I ask you, do you have peace where you are? Do you feel like you're growing, spiritually, emotionally, as a person? Or are you just surviving? Because where there is purpose, there is movement. Where there is life, there is renewal. God never meant for you to live in a place that's just the shell of what it used to be. He wants to place you where your spirit can bloom again. But for that to happen, you have to understand that even the comfort zone can turn into a battlefield. You don't need to have all the answers to take the next step. Sometimes, God will ask you to leave before He even shows you where to go. And that's terrifying, because we were taught to only move when everything's planned out, when there's safety, when the path is well lit. But faith doesn't walk on certainty, it walks on obedience. And God honors the ones who move even while shaking. Because trusting God means walking in the dark, knowing He sees in the light. Abraham left his land without GPS, without a compass, without any guarantees. He had only one instruction, go. And he went. He stepped out of his comfort zone, left his father's house, abandoned the culture he knew, just because he heard a promise. God didn't give him details. God gave him a word, and that word was enough. Maybe that's exactly what you need right now, to stop asking for signs and start responding to the call. There are places you need to leave, even if you don't know where you're going, because the promise isn't on the map, it's in God's direction. The next place is already prepared. God doesn't improvise. He's just waiting for you to step out of the old so He can release the new. It's like a door that won't open while the previous one is still occupied. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but it's in discomfort that faith grows. Some people hearing this right now already know it's past time to leave, but they're still stuck in fear. And you know what's interesting? Sometimes the fear of leaving is smaller than the damage of staying. God removes you from environments where your soul is silently dying. Not because He wants to punish you, not because He's given up on you, but because He loves you too much to watch you slowly fade away in a place that no longer feeds your essence. God doesn't just want you to function, He wants you to live. And truly living requires courage. The courage to let go of what once made sense, but no longer represents who you are. So stop trying to stay where God has already removed you emotionally. Deep down, you already know it's no longer your place. Your soul has warned you. Your peace has left. Your motivation has dried up. Obey. Trust. Move forward. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need enough faith to say, if God pulled me out, it's because He's already prepared what's next. What feels like the end to you is the beginning to God. But a new beginning only starts when you're willing to leave the old behind. Environments that suffocate you weren't made for your new version. You've grown, and old places can't hold new roots. The silence of your soul today could become the cry of your freedom tomorrow. Listen to that silence. It's not killing you, it's pushing you. God doesn't want you to merely endure. He wants you to flourish. And maybe the only thing missing right now is your decision.